Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at a piece of news that on the surface honestly sounds like the absolute cure for insomnia.
Yeah, you're really selling it right out of the gate here.
I know. But stick with me on this one because it involves a government press release, a very long title, and the word committee.
Right, the absolute kiss of death for an exciting headline.
Exactly. But what we are actually talking about here is Premier Rob Lantz's very first major maneuver to define his new government. We are talking about the newly established Cabinet Committee on Fiscal Responsibility and Red Tape Reduction.
Which is quite a mouthful of a title. I mean, it is. But if you strip away that bureaucratic paint, what you are really looking at is the new engine room of this administration.
Yeah.
This isn't just about balancing a spreadsheet. It is about how the government actually intends to function, how it interacts with you, the islanders, and, frankly, whether it can survive its own political ambitions.
And that is exactly why we wanted to cover this for you today, because it's so easy to just gloss over a phrase like fiscal responsibility as a standard political buzzword.
Absolutely. Everyone uses it.
Right. But when you look at the specific mandate that was handed down to this group, and we have the full 6-point list from the sources, it is actually incredibly aggressive.
It really is.
We are seeing everything in there, from a total review of public spending to the integration of artificial intelligence into the public service.
Which is a massive leap for a provincial government to take on.
It is a huge leap. So our mission today is to completely decode this for you. We need to understand the political pressure cooker that this committee was born into, who's actually running the show, and what these so-called program effectiveness analyses actually mean for someone just trying to, say, renew a driver's license or run a farm in PEI.
Right, because ultimately policy is just theory until it actually hits the ground.
Exactly. So let's start with the context. To understand why this committee even exists, you have to look at how Rob Lantz got into the premier's chair in the first place.
Right, the leadership race.
Yeah. He didn't just inherit the crown, he really had to fight for it.
It was a fascinating race to watch. You had Lantz up against Mark Ledwell, and it was not a coronation by any stretch.
No.
The sources described it as a closely watched race, which is basically polite political code for saying it was incredibly tight.
And when you win a tight race like that, you don't exactly have this massive sweeping mandate to just burn everything down and start over from scratch.
No, you don't. You are actually quite vulnerable.
Right. You have to prove your competence immediately.
Exactly. So Lantz came out of that victory pledging 3 very specific things: stability, continuity, and responsible governance.
Let's break those down a bit.
Sure. So continuity is essentially the shield. It tells the party base and the general public that the sky isn't falling, that things are steady.
Keep calm and carry on.
Right. But responsible governance, that is the sword. It is his way of saying, okay, the previous guy did a good job, but we are going to do it tighter, we're going to do it cheaper, and we're going to do it faster.
Which is a remarkably difficult line to walk. I mean, you are essentially critiquing the past administration while simultaneously promising to build on their exact legacy.
It is the classic new leader dilemma. You have to differentiate yourself, right? You have to show you are in charge now.
Yeah.
But you have to do it without alienating the exact people who voted for your party in the last election.
Yeah.
And that is exactly why this specific committee is so important politically.
How so?
It allows Lantz to externalize the really hard decisions. He can say, look, I'm not cutting these services because I want to. I'm doing it because the Committee on Fiscal Responsibility found efficiencies that we just have to act on.
So it creates a buffer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A political buffer.
And he also reshaped the cabinet specifically to feed into this new structure. The news out of the premier's office really highlighted that these recent cabinet adjustments were heavily designed to align operations with this new fiscal focus.
Right. It wasn't just moving deck chairs around.
No, this wasn't an afterthought. The entire cabinet was essentially built to support the work of this committee.
And structure dictates function in government. If you put the fiscal hawks in charge of the structure, you are going to get a hawkish government.
Speaking of the hawks, let's look at the actual personnel here. Who is sitting at this table?
The lineup tells you everything you need to know about how much weight this committee carries. If this were just some throwaway public relations committee, you would see junior ministers on it or maybe some backbenchers.
People who need something to do.
Exactly. But here you have the finance minister, Jill Burridge, stepping in as the chair.
Which makes perfect sense, obviously. She controls the purse strings.
She does. But look at who is sitting right there with her. Sydney McEwen, Jill's Arsenal, Blois Thompson, Darlene Compton.
Those are not lightweights.
Not at all. These are heavy hitters. These are senior ministers who hold significant, massive portfolios.
Yeah.
I mean, when Blois Thompson walks into a room, people tend to listen. Having him and the others on this committee sends a very clear signal. It says this group has the actual political capital to force changes down the throats of other departments if they have to.
And that is a really key point for you to keep in mind. Because so often we see these committees get formed, they make these grand recommendations, and then the report just sits on a shelf gathering dust.
Because they don't have the muscle to actually implement anything.
Right. But this group has teeth.
Precisely. And if you look at Minister Burridge's comments in the sources, she is framing their work very, very carefully. She used the specific phrase, disciplined financial stewardship.
Stewardship. That is a very interesting word choice. It feels a lot softer than a word like austerity.
Oh, it is highly deliberate. Austerity implies pain. It implies cuts and hardship. Stewardship implies care, like you were tending to a garden.
That's a great way to put it.
She is explicitly stating that their goal is to balance managing public finances on one hand with delivering the services islanders rely on the other. She is trying to get way ahead of the opposition narrative that this is just some ruthless slash-and-burn exercise.
But there is a very real clock ticking on this, isn't there?
Yeah.
This is not some open-ended philosophy club that meets once a quarter.
No, and honestly, this is the part of the whole announcement that stood out to me the absolute most. They have a 12-month mandate.
Oh, wow.
In the slow-moving world of government bureaucracy, 12 months is just a blink of an eye. Usually, it takes a committee 6 months just to agree on what their terms of reference are going to be.
So why the massive rush?
It signals urgency from the top. Lantz wants wins, and he needs those wins before the next election cycle really starts heating up and dominating the conversation.
He needs a scorecard to show people.
Exactly. He needs to go back to the voters and say, look at what we did. We saved X amount of millions of dollars, and we cut your wait times by Y%. If this committee takes 3 years to finally report back, it is politically useless to him.
Okay, so they have exactly 12 months to essentially fix the government. Let's look at their actual to-do list. The Premier's office handed down a very specific 6-point mandate.
Let's break it down.
I really want to go through these points because some of them seem pretty standard for a conservative government, but others are remarkably ambitious given that 12-month timeline.
Yeah, ambitious might be an understatement.
So the first one is the classic standard. Conduct a comprehensive review of public expenditures.
The audit. This is the foundation of everything else they are going to do. You cannot fix what you do not measure. They are going to look at every single line item in the budget and ask, is this necessary? Is this returning value?
Then we have point number 2, reduced administrative burden across departments.
Which is the red tape reduction part of their title. Now, politically, everyone cheers for cutting red tape. It's an easy win. But we really need to be careful with how we analyze this.
How so? What is the risk there?
Because in government, one person's red tape is very often another person's safety protection.
Well, but
If you cut the administrative burden of, say, environmental inspections, you save money. And you speed up construction projects, sure.
which developers love.
Exactly. But you might also end up with a contaminated water supply a few years down the line. So the real challenge for Minister Burridge and her team is distinguishing between genuinely useless paperwork and essential public safeguards.
And that leads really well into the third point they were given. Improve customer service standards. This feels to me like a direct response to that red tape issue. It's shifting the entire perspective over to the end user.
It is attempting to bring a private sector mindset into the public sector. Think about it. If you go to a local coffee shop and the service is terrible and slow, you just leave. You go across the street. You cannot do that with the provincial government. You can't go to a competitor to get your building permit or your health card.
You are a totally captive audience.
Exactly. And because you are a captive audience, government services very often become complacent over time. This mandate is explicitly saying, no, we need to treat islanders like paying customers who actually deserve efficiency.
It sounds great on paper, but implementing a true customer service culture in a bureaucracy that has done things the exact same way for maybe 30 years, that has to be incredibly difficult.
But it's massive.
Well, if culture changes that hard, maybe technology is the shortcut they're looking for. Because point number 4 is the one that really caught my eye.
The AI point.
Yes. Advance the responsible use of artificial intelligence in public services.
This is absolutely the wild card of the entire mandate.
It feels very Silicon Valley for a provincial cabinet committee in PEI.
It does sound like that, but it is actually where the biggest potential for real efficiency lies today. Think back to that administrative button we were just talking about. A massive amount of government work is just data entry. It's processing standard forms and answering the exact same basic questions over and over again on the phone.
The kind of stuff that human workers generally hate doing anyway.
Exactly. And it is stuff that humans are very expensive at doing. If you can deploy a well-trained AI tool to handle all the initial intake of permit applications, or to answer 80% of the routine queries coming into the provincial call centers.
Then you free up the actual human staff to handle the complex, nuanced cases.
Precisely. You get faster service for the easy stuff and better care for the hard stuff.
But the mandate specifically says responsible use of artificial intelligence.
And that word responsible is doing a massive amount of heavy lifting in that sentence.
Because the risks are real.
They are very real. We have seen other governments around the world try to automate things like calculating social assistance benefits, and it ended in absolute disaster because the algorithm was fundamentally flawed or inherently biased.
All right, you definitely do not want a computer accidentally denying someone's essential healthcare coverage just because of a line of bad code.
Exactly. So asking this new committee to not only identify where AI can be useful, but to also build the entire governance framework to ensure it is used safely, and to do all of that within 12 months.
It's a tall order.
It is an incredibly heavy lift. You are basically asking a provincial government to definitively solve regulatory problems that global tech giants are still struggling to figure out.
It really sounds like they are trying to leapfrog a whole decade of gradual, slow modernization.
They are. And look, if they pull it off, it is a massive defining win for Lantz. But if they botch it, it is going to be a privacy and PR nightmare.
So let's look at the final 2 points to round this out. Identify opportunities for regional collaboration and ensure programs are delivering measurable value. That regional collaboration piece, what does that actually look like in practice for PEI?
That is what you might call the don't go it alone strategy. PEI is a very small province. You simply do not have the purchasing power of an Ontario or a Quebec.
Right.
But if you align your efforts with New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, suddenly you have real scale.
So we are talking about buying things together.
Procurement is the big one, yes. Buying MRI machines, bulk road salt, massive enterprise software licenses. If the Atlantic provinces pool their money and buy as a unified block, they get a much better price.
That makes total sense.
But it goes a lot deeper than just buying things. It is also about regulatory alignment.
What do you mean by that? Like trucking rules?
Perfect example. If a commercial truck driver has to follow one specific set of transport rules in Moncton, and then a completely different set of rules the second they cross the Confederation Bridge into PEI, that causes friction.
And friction always equals cost.
Exactly. If this committee can just say, hey, let's simply adopt the exact same standard as our neighbors, you instantly cut red tape for businesses without spending a single dime of taxpayer money.
It seems like basic common sense. But I imagine that final point, the measurable value part, is where the real internal friction is going to come from.
Oh, without a doubt.
Because how do you objectively measure value in something like, say, an after-school literacy program?
That is the eternal, unwinnable struggle of government. Value is inherently subjective. Is a government program valuable because it saves the Treasury money, or is it valuable because it drastically improves someone's quality of life?
But the mandate specifies measurable value.
Which implies data. They want hard metrics. They want spreadsheets that prove a return on investment.
And if a department head can't produce a neat little chart showing that their program works efficiently,
then that program is in serious trouble. And that is exactly where the anxiety is currently building for the civil service. This tool they are launching, the Program Effectiveness Analysis, it isn't just a friendly little check-in chat.
No.
It is a rigorous audit. They are actively hunting for duplication.
Can you give me a concrete example of what that kind of duplication might look like on the ground?
Sure. Let's say you are a local farmer in PEI. You might have to rigorously report your land usage details to the Department of Agriculture to qualify for a specific grant.
Okay.
But then a week later, the Department of Environment asks you for the exact same topographical map so you can get a water usage permit.
Right.
And maybe the provincial tax agency asks for it a third time for your property assessment.
So as a farmer, you are filling out 3 massive form packets for the exact same plot of dirt.
Right. And on the government side of the equation, you have 3 entirely different teams of civil servants manually processing those 3 identical forms. That is duplication.
And a huge waste of time.
A program effectiveness analysis would theoretically spot that and say, let's build one unified digital portal. The farmer uploads the map exactly once, and all three departments pull the data from there.
That sounds fantastic for the farmer.
It is, but for the government departments themselves, it means merging teams, totally changing 30-year-old workflows, and maybe losing direct control over a portion of their budget.
Ah.
And that is why internal bureaucratic resistance is the silent killer of these types of committees. Everyone loves the idea of efficiency in the abstract, but nobody wants their own specific department to be the one that gets streamlined.
That brings us right back to the central tension of this whole initiative. Premier Lantz is trying to balance building on the work of the previous premier with strengthening financial accountability.
It is a very sophisticated, polite way of saying the last government had the right broad ideas, but their day-to-day execution was sloppy. He wants to keep the policy goals, but he wants to completely overhaul the how.
But isn't there a massive risk there? If you focus so intensely on the how-on, the sheer efficiency, and the audit spreadsheets, don't you risk losing sight of the actual human impact of the services?
That is the inherent danger of a purely technocratic government. You can easily design a system that looks perfectly, flawlessly efficient on a piece of paper, but is absolutely miserable for a citizen to actually experience.
Right.
You can optimize a healthcare clinic queue so that the line moves twice as fast, but if the doctor now only has 2 minutes to talk to you because they have to hit their new efficiency targets, have you actually improved the healthcare service?
No, you've just sped up the conveyor belt.
Yeah,
That is the customer service versus fiscal responsibility battle. It's a cage match.
it absolutely is. And Finance Minister Jill Burge has just been appointed the referee.
So let's project this forward a bit for our listeners.
Mm-hmm.
We are basically in month one of this 12-month sprint. What exactly are we looking for? What are the signposts over the next year that will tell us if this is actually working or if it's just going to be another glossy report destined for a dusty shelf?
You need to watch the announcements coming out of the individual line departments. If this committee is actually functioning the way Lantz wants it to, you shouldn't just be hearing press releases from the committee itself.
You'd hear it from the actual ministries.
Exactly. You should hear the health minister standing up and announcing a brand new, streamlined patient booking system. You should hear the agriculture minister announcing those combined digital permits we talked about.
So the real proof will be in the specific operational changes, not the broad philosophical statements.
Exactly. And keep a very close eye on that AI rollout. If we see a real pilot project, say an AI chatbot for tourism inquiries or a digital assistant for new business registration, if we see that within 6 months, we know they are dead serious.
And if we don't,
If we hear absolutely nothing for 11 months and then they just drop a theoretical strategy paper on AI, we know the bureaucracy bogged them down.
the source material mentions that political observers really see this as the defining tone for the Lantz government. If they pull this off, if they actually modernize the public service and balance the books while they do it, he basically looks like a genius manager.
He becomes the CEO premier, the steady, competent hand at the wheel.
But if the services degrade, if the drive for efficiency just leads to longer waits or confusing automated phone trees that just frustrate people,
Then the entire political narrative flips on him. Then fiscal responsibility just becomes opposition code for cruel cuts, and red tape reduction becomes code for dangerously cutting corners. And that is a very, very dangerous place for a first-term premier to be.
it really highlights just how astronomically high the stakes are for a committee with such a boring bureaucratic name.
Boring names are very often exactly where the real power hides in government.
We've covered the key players, the massive mandate, and the political risks. But I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought today, something we haven't really touched on yet, but that builds directly on this whole 12-month sprint idea.
Go.
We've talked about how fast 12 months is. But what happens on month 13?
That is a great question.
If a government proves that it can fundamentally overhaul its entire operational philosophy in a single year by using an emergency-style cabinet committee, does that just become the new normal for how we govern?
Right. Do we abandon long-term strategy?
Exactly. Do we just stop doing thoughtful 10-year systemic planning because politicians suddenly realize they can just launch a 12-month strike force to get immediate credit from the voters?
It is a very real risk to the long-term stability of the civil service. You can't run a government on adrenaline forever.
Something for all of us to mull over as we watch this committee begin its work. That is all the time we have for our deep dive today into the machinery of the new Lantz government.
It was a pleasure to break it down. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for listening. We really hope this helps you decode the daily political headlines a little bit better. Have a safe and pleasant week, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.